Next on BYUSN, so much for a relaxing bye week. Big 12 football has gone bonkers. And we have a bunch of questions, like where does BYU rank among all 14 conference teams? Are the Cougars in the top 5? And does any team not named OU or Texas have a shot to win the title?
ESPN's Trevor Maddox weighs in on the state of the Big 12, plus the increased winnability of BYU's game at TCU Saturday. And Gonzaga and the Big 12 are talking again, reportedly. Do we think the Zags will actually be in the league at some point?
Welcome to BYU Sports Nation, presented by the BYU Store, official outfitter of BYU fans everywhere. It is Monday, October 9th. I am Spencer Linton alongside a man who's having some trouble locking down his Cougars in the NFL jersey collection, Jerem Jordan.
Apparently, Puka Nakua's jersey is sold out on the NFL shop website. All 17 that they had before the season have been sold. There's no way they could have anticipated like what he would become, right? So it is with all of us. We are to become much more than we're anticipated to be. But personally, I am not a wear a jersey of another team that I don't root for guy. Like, if I wear a jersey, it is the teams I root for. I cannot wear another. That is my creed.
So if it was just given to you for free, let's say it's a Jamal Williams Saints jersey, you wouldn't do that?
No.
Because I understand the 49ers and the Rams being in the division of your favorite team.
I could express my Jamaldom without wearing his jersey.
Okay.
Yeah. No, I'm loyal to my teams, man. That's how I express some loyalty.
Okay. Yeah. Fair enough.
We do have a friend who would wear the jersey of the latest and greatest around here, and we called him Drake, because Drake seemed to just jump on the bandwagon of the newest, hottest team. He did get that nickname around these parts.
See, yeah. So I definitely I understand. I feel loyalty to the Cincinnati Bengals, but you know, when you're given a jersey from, let's say, our guy Dax Milne, like he has a good game. Yeah, I don't have any problems repping that. Probably because the Commanders and Bengals will never cross paths at any point.
Also, no one cares about the Commanders. Just no one cares. Okay? So it's not like a threat. But I just don't personally want to do that. Yeah. No. I can express my my fandom and loyalty in another way.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, it's time to express BYU fandom for all of you watching across the nation. It's a huge week for BYU football. All rise and shout. Let's get to what's trending.
And here come the horns. LJ! The pass is caught. Longhorns touchdown. The end zone touchdown. Pop for the touchdown. He came down with it.
The Big 12 has gone bonkers. A wild weekend of football across the conference during BYU's bye week, no less, that was highlighted by just a classic Red River rivalry showdown between Texas and Oklahoma.
Great game.
Multiple head-scratching upsets, beginning on Friday night with Oklahoma State giving it to Kansas State. I mean, it was crazy. Okay, then there was a couple of straight blowouts. Teams we thought might be more competitive. They weren't. So let's evaluate the current state of the Big 12 Conference from top to bottom with a number of questions. And yes, where BYU sits in the equation, but we'll start at the top, which is where Oklahoma sits. Jerem, after beating Texas in that Red River rivalry, this is probably a no-duh question, but are you buying in that Oklahoma right now is the best team in the Big 12?
Yeah, they have the best league win. The best win still is, Texas beating Alabama on the road. But Oklahoma beating Texas, yeah, for sure. It's not just that, though. It's the most points scored. It's the fewest points allowed. It's the win head-to-head against Texas. Absolutely. Up to number 5 now in the 8 people. Texas clearly number 1. And to me, Oklahoma clearly number 1. Texas clearly number 2 still.
I waffle a little bit because I look at the -3 in turnover margin that Texas had, and the Longhorns still had every opportunity to win that game. If we lined this up again and played the game 10 times, I feel like Texas would probably win the majority of those games against Oklahoma. That's what's so fickle and fun and beautiful about college football is
sports in general.
You got one shot, right?
One opportunity.
The best team on paper or the best team does not always win an individual contest because of so many different mitigating factors and luck. That's why you play. At all. It is so fun. I love that. So, yes, Oklahoma right now, technically speaking, is the best team in the Big 12 because they're the only team at 3-0. but I feel like Texas has every opportunity to win out, and they'll be heavily favored to do so, and see Oklahoma in a Big 12 Conference Championship game and win that game again. And then Texas is the best team in the conference.
More on that in a moment.
Yeah. So it's a weird dynamic. Right now, yeah, Oklahoma is number one, but it took -3 against the Longhorns, and they still had to have a game-winning drive with no timeouts and under a minute and a half to play from Dylan Gabriel to secure that.
Those are part of it, though. You know what I mean? Like, those are part of the game. That's how you win or lose a game. Oftentimes, sometimes you have to create those. Sometimes you have to get lucky. But yeah, it's all part of it, man.
It's one game.
Yeah. Okay, who's the worst team in the Big 12?
It's an easy answer for me. This is Houston. Like, I feel like Houston is the worst team in the conference. And I don't think Houston's a bad program. I like Dana Holgorsen. We enjoyed talking with him at Big 12 Conference Media Days. But he's dealing with a lot of moving parts. He lost more than half of his roster. And he's trying to build a culture there.
BYU did too.
With so many moving parts.
BYU lost half the roster.
True.
Yeah.
I don't know. I bought into what he was selling us in July, which is I have no idea what I have right now. I felt like BYU, at least going into the season, had an idea of what they had. I didn't get that impression from Dana Holgorsen. And frankly, I'm seeing the results of that question mark going into the season. Just they have not gelled, they have not meshed, they have not been opportunistic. Houston, to me, right now is the worst team in the Big 12.
UCF in league is 0-3. Granted, at Kansas State, at Kansas, those are tough, but they're giving up a lot of points right now.
They got blown out by Kansas and the Jayhawks' backup quarterback.
Yeah, Jason Mr. Bean.
Mr. Bean.
Yeah, Houston 0-2, some blowout losses, TCU, Texas Tech. Yeah, I can see that too. Those two have been surprising that they haven't been a little more competitive. No John Rice Plumlee for UCF certainly is a big deal, but Timmy McClain's a capable backup. We've seen this guy in 2021 for South Florida. So a little bit surprising. I go with UCF right now. You are what you do. You're 0-3, man. Giving up a lot of points.
35-7 on Baylor in the middle of the third quarter, and they somehow lose that game.
You're a bad team if you give up that lead.
That is brutal.
You're a bad team.
To Baylor at home.
Who's not good either.
So, yeah, right now it's Houston, but it's a tough question.
UCF doth stink.
Who's in the bottom three?
Smell that.
All right. Where would you rank BYU in the Big 12 right now?
6. I go Oklahoma, Texas, Kansas. West Virginia's up there because they beat Texas Tech and TCU. I go Texas Tech at 5 because they're 2-1 in league. The one loss is at West Virginia, which isn't that bad of a loss anymore suddenly. And then the two other non-conference losses, yeah, losing at Wyoming stinks, but
Wyoming's pretty good. Wyoming they're 2 spots out of the top 25.
There you go, see? And then 8-point loss at Oregon. That's very respectable. Like, I think the Tech's actually pretty good in spite of, Tyler Shuck being injured. So I go BYU at 6 ahead of Iowa State. Kansas State right now looking a little weird, and then TCU. Again,
oh, man.
The perception of what we thought before the season, I'm chucking that out the window. I'm just looking at what have you actually done this year.
Yeah, I had BYU number 7 going into the weekend after the crazy shuffle. 6 is probably fair, but I'm hesitant to go there to put BYU ahead of TCU because BYU is a 5-point underdog in Fort Worth this weekend. And I see the football power index, and it's like BYU's got less than a 30% chance to win that game.
Those are weird numbers given what TCU's done the last 2 weeks and the injured quarterback and Chandler Morris.
Yeah, Chandler Morris is not going to be available to play quarterback for the Horned Frogs this weekend.
He hurt the same knee he hurt last year and missed the year. He tore his MCL last year against Colorado in game 1.
They're afraid he re-aggravated that.
Yeah, well, you'd think it's a tear of some kind. A sprain is a partial tear, right? So it's either a sprain or a full tear, it seems like. Hopefully, it's not too bad, but BYU, that's not BYU's problem. BYU got to go in there and play a game regardless of who the quarterback is. So whether it's Josh Hoover, the redshirt freshman, or it's, Chandler Morris.
I mean, TCU embarrassed Houston, but again, I think Houston's the worst team in the conference.
Houston stinks right now.
The head scratcher for me is how they played against Iowa State, even losing Chandler Morris.
4 picks, 2 from Morris, 1 from Hoover. And then one was a wide receiver pass from J.P. Richardson.
Frankly, TCU probably should have beaten West Virginia.
TCU didn't put up enough points in this game, and there was a blocked punt
Blocked field goal.
Yeah, it's crazy. So, yeah, TCU has issues. TCU is absolutely winnable this Saturday for BYU. With that said, TCU has another level of speed and power that I am aware of when BYU goes and plays this game. I'm not saying BYU is just showing up and winning easy. Like, no, there's not a single game on the schedule like that. In fact, the only game where BYU showed up and it was easy was Southern Utah. It wasn't even easy against Sam Houston. So I respect TCU, but yeah, it's wild to think about where we are and feeling coming into this game, given the last literally 9 days of TCU football have shown us things where it's like, oh, BYU can absolutely go in there and win. Absolutely.
Yes. If BYU wins in Fort Worth, I'm ready to put them in the top 5 of the conference. But it's
You're waiting for a more notable win?
It's going to take a road win, yeah, because...
Although TCU is not that notable of a win as much as we thought, but it is still TCU. Like, this is not last year's team. They got lucky in some /skilled, whatever you want to call it, in like 7 one-score games that were 6-1. Like, those aren't happening this year.
I've seen BYU
Sonny Dykes has said as much.
At Kansas, with Kansas at full strength, with their star quarterback playing, and BYU, in many ways, what feels like to BYU fans, giving the game away, right? Like, if Kansas is the 3rd best team and they're ranked, and BYU is like right there with them, and you come home, beat Cincinnati, and then you go on the road and beat TCU, I'm like, okay. All right, BYU, you're halfway into the season.
Now you're in the conversation
and you are a top 5 team.
Now you're a dark horse to make the Big 12 title game. Like, people are talking like that. But here's the thing. I would take one win in October. If it comes this Saturday and the next Saturday at home, against Texas Tech, and you're 2-1, you go to Texas, you compete, you lose, whatever. Great. Like, if BYU somehow gets 2 wins in October, I will be super happy. Okay, next one. Who's the biggest surprise team right now?
West Virginia, no question.
Yes.
They were picked to finish last in the conference. Like, there were some salty players.
Neil Brown was
coach
like,
Neil Brown was not happy. We felt it in our interview with him.
I think that's the one I missed. I had to leave. I had to go to Austin, so I was like, see ya.
Yeah, Neil was not happy. And he spread the message. He's like, look, we got one of the best offensive lines. We have one of
Zach
the most
Frazier is one of the best
offensive
guards in the country.
In the entire country.
Yeah, he's really
How
good.
can people rank us behind all 4 of the newcomers and rank West Virginia dead last?
Yeah.
He was not happy, and his team, they're proving it right now. They are the biggest surprise, and they're a dark horse right now to get to the Big 12 title game too. If they can pull some stunning upset.
They don't have a crazy schedule coming down the stretch either. Iowa State takes second by far. The win over Oklahoma State wasn't a big deal because we thought Oklahoma State stunk, but then they beat Kansas State. But the win against TCU was like, oh, okay.
They're different. They're an entirely different team.
Yes.
Than 3 weeks ago.
And it was throwback unis for Jack Trice Stadium. One of the first, if not the first, black player in college football history. Like, super cool. Only stadium named after a black player.
Amazing story.
in college football. I will. If you haven't read the letter that Jack Trice wrote, like, it's incredible. You gotta see the story. Iowa State embraced that. Cool looking unis with like the 5 stripes logo and everything. Big win against TCU, right? Big win. And they're playing with a backup quarterback as well.
He's better than the starter, frankly.
Yeah. Hunter Decker led the Big 12 in picks last year with 14. So Rocco Bent, I think?
Yes.
Something like that. This dude ran for 152. They had a great game. They had a great game yesterday. So, yeah, I agree.
Iowa State.
West Virginia, Iowa State, biggest surprise.
Like a rise.
I am surprised that UCF's not any good in the league right now, too, because they were supposed to be, like, the best of the other 4, which we'll get to in a sec. But, like, they stunk in league play.
Didn't Iowa State score 7 points in a home loss against a MAC team?
They lost to Iowa, yeah.
Ohio on the road.
Ohio. They also lost to Iowa.
Yes.
But Ohio.
I think it was 10-7, wasn't it?
It was 10-7. Yeah. So Iowa State in league 2-1, man.
Ohio.
2-1.
They look nothing like the team that scored 7 points against Ohio.
Yeah. Drew Carey ain't yelling at anybody right now.
Man, oh man. All right. Those are your surprise teams. We both said last week over the final 7 games, we're expecting BYU to go 3-4 and finish 4-5 in league play.
Yes.
After the weekend, are you still feeling that 3-4 is the mark?
Yes, I need to see BYU beat TCU, and then I would be like, now it's 4-3.
Because that's a game you're expecting
I penciled in
the
loss, but the winnability of this game is still high. Again, it's still a tough place to go and win. Like, if BYU goes and wins this game, absolutely, I'm going, okay, you're +1 on what I thought now. You're above expected wins right here.
Oh, man. Is beating TCU the key to BYU having a winning league record? Maybe.
You have to do something in October we don't expect. Because in October, we expect 1 and 2.
Like West Virginia now looks just like an absolute gauntlet to go across the country in early November, a week after playing at Texas.
Iowa State and Oklahoma State are 2 wins that in November we've said, hey, go and get those wins, and then we'll just see if you can't, compete with Oklahoma at home. And then West Virginia we thought is kind of a toss-up. That's a really tough game.
Yes.
So maybe you need to beat TCU just in case you go 1 and 3 in November. But I expect 2 and 2 in November.
I'm of the opinion that BYU is going to win a game that we are all like, whoa, we did not expect BYU to beat that team. Maybe it's at West Virginia. Maybe it's at TCU. Maybe it's a shocker against Oklahoma or Texas.
That would be fun.
There will be one of those in there. There will be one of those in there.
But what's the head-scratching loss then?
But that's going to be the counteracting thing.
Is it Iowa State or Oklahoma State at home?
They lost to Iowa State at home.
What would be a head-scratching loss at this point? Just Iowa State or Oklahoma State at home,
Probably Iowa State at home, or like losing at Oklahoma State.
At Oklahoma State. One of those two would be a head-scratching loss because he's like, you got to win those ones.
But what will those teams be when BYU finally crosses past?
I don't know, because I thought Kansas State was good, and then they lost to stinky Oklahoma State. Like, there are no clunkers. Like, we thought there were no clunkers. There are no clunkers. You got to show up for every game. You don't know. Kansas State, we're the champs. You lose to Oklahoma State, who has like 4 quarterbacks. What's going on?
Beat TCU, you got a shot to win 8 games and finish with a winning record in the league.
I'll take 7 games. I don't need 8, but I'll take 7.
But 3 and 4 right now, yes, feels like the appropriate target still.
What do you mean? We're running the table and going to the Big 12. Is BYU the best of the 4 newcomers?
Yes.
It's not close right now, right?
No, UCF has been awful.
0-3 in league.
They look terrible against Kansas. They lost a terrible game against Baylor that we already talked about.
Yeah, that was
cold. You're 35-7 on your home field against Baylor.
Yeah.
You got to close that out. BYU beat Cincinnati head-to-head.
Yep,
They beat Houston head-to-head. So
they beat UCF right now.
Yeah, BYU's the best of the new 4-comers.
Yeah, look at us. Hey, what's up?
I don't think that should be a surprise.
What's going on?
UCF was picked to finish 8th, and remember, BYU was picked to finish 11th in the preseason poll.
Not like a huge difference.
Okay. If the Cougars can be like top 6, though?
Oh, we'll take upper crust, upper half.
Yeah.
Upper half, I'd take it right now.
You get Oklahoma going to like college football playoff, and then Texas, whoever wins the Big 12 championship, one of those teams is in the college football playoff.
Potentially.
Right? And then
at least in the sugar.
If BYU is like a top 5 team or a top 6 team, you're going to play in a nice bowl game against a really good opponent.
Riddle me this. Anything but Independence, nice bowl game?
Yes.
Yeah. Yes. I read a TCU article in the Fort Worth Star-Telegram, right? I love reading me some telegrams in the morning with my unsugared Cheerios that I grew up eating.
That sounds
Just
delicious.
kidding. I don't. Anyway, they were talking about, hey, they've got to win 3 of the next 6 just to go to the Independence Bowl. They were like, they were not happy about it either. Yeah, BYU is clearly the best of the 4 at the moment. And by the end of the year, I hope BYU is as well. UCF is the huge surprise there. Houston didn't expect a ton from, right? Cincinnati expected to be competitive, but kind of middle of the pack, kind of like BYU. So, hey, so far so good, man. But BYU's got to go out on the road and win a game now.
I'm telling you.
Like some of that Arkansas energy.
BYU wins at TCU. Things are going to get very, very interesting.
5-1, 2-1 in league.
Things will get very
How fun has
interesting.
been in the Big 12, by the way? Isn't this great?
And watching every other team play.
Oh, my gosh. We're not talking about Boise State anymore in a random one-off in the regular season.
Be honest, BYU fans.
This is great.
Would you legitimately have had any interest in watching Kansas State and Oklahoma State on a Friday night during BYU's bye week?
I'm in San Diego over the bye week. I'm watching Iowa State and TCU, and I'm like, this is the best. Also, I watched every snap of Red Zone yesterday driving. It was one of the greatest days of my life.
Football bye week for sure.
It was beautiful.
Let's get to our Mailbag Monday, where you ask the questions and we answer them. Cameron Heelis on Facebook presents question number 1. I don't think it's crazy to have BYU as slight favorites. If BYU is facing TCU's backup quarterback, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, his name's Josh Hoover, highly sought at TCU, redshirt freshman. I'd still have TCU by a hair. Just home team, still got quality there. I know they're coming off 2 losses.
They're still a 5-point favorite, last I saw.
Still a 5-point favorite, still 28% FBI chance to win for BYU. So we don't know quite yet, but I would expect Hoover to be the starter. So, and I'd still have TCU. Like, if I'm Vegas, do I think BYU is going to win the game if Josh Hoover starts? Like, it certainly helps BYU's cause. BYU has been contingent on turnovers.
Yes.
Like, if BYU plays an even game, I don't know. Like, BYU might need to be +1 or 2 with meaningful turnovers.
What has TCU accomplished this season? That's where I'm struggling with this and having a little bit of a hard time with the Horned Frogs being a 5-point favorite, because you lost to Colorado, and all of a sudden that, like, Colorado, like, that win is devalued for Colorado because TCU has not been that good.
Yeah, and Colorado's coming down to earth.
Yes.
Yeah.
They beat Nicholls State by 35. They beat a bad Houston team.
Beat SMU.
They beat SMU, who's
your primary rival.
But then you lose to West Virginia and you lose to Iowa State by 13. I think there's an identity crisis for TCU.
TCU looking very mid right now. Looking super mid.
They're still good. They still are loaded with talent, but they have an identity crisis right now, and they don't have a starting quarterback.
BYU does not, which is we can kind of run the football, maybe, and we play good defense, and we're explosive. BYU knows what it is at this point.
All that said,
they'd like to be more.
I still think the Horned Frogs has a slight favorite. I think 5's too high, but as a slight favorite feels appropriate.
By the way, prepare yourself for this week. So they do the Horned Frog thing. It's this. I finally learned it. It's that. It spits blood out of its eyes.
Is there a Horned Frog down?
Number 7. You're going to get fined by the league. Number 7, BYU women's soccer playing a big game tonight. Hey, Cougars, only team in the Big 12 with no conference home win.
That changes
They have
tonight.
3 ties. They're playing Kansas State, 7 Eastern, a little earlier than normal on Big 12 Now on ESPN+.
Up next, it's time for a loaded edition of Manage Monday. What does he make of the current wild state of the Big 12? And does he think BYU should beat TCU? This is BYU Sports Nation.
This portion of BYU Sports Nation is presented by BYU Food to Go, the MVP of your next event.
When you think Ford, think Tim Daly Ford in Spanish Fork. With a selection of trucks, Broncos, and the all-electric Ford Lightning. Plus, on-site technicians who provide routine service and repairs with free pickup and delivery. And parts can be made readily available if you'd like to do it yourself. Tim Daly is your neighborhood Ford dealer, located right off the freeway in Spanish Fork.
You're not ready for a BYU football game without BYU Sports Nation Game Day on BYUtv. Join in the excitement 2 hours before kickoff in Cougar Canyon. The cast and crew are locked and loaded to pregame every matchup this season. Join in the experience for each home game just outside the stadium. There's nothing like the tradition, spirit, and fun that connect Cougar fans everywhere. Join in person on BYUtv or on the free app.
And he's going down for the first time tonight. Tyler Batty. The freshman. Martin's got a first down. Martin's loose.
We fight. We're going to win some games. We're going to be a powerhouse in the Big 12.
We are live in Studio B with your day-to-day BYU sports play-by-play. I'm Spencer Linton alongside Jerem Jordan. Once again, it's a game week for Cougar football following a bye on Saturday. To help us recap what in the world happened in the Big 12 over the weekend is ESPN college football analyst and insider, all-around good man. It's Trevor Matich, back for another Matich Monday. Trevor, BYU, again, had the bye, but my goodness, what a strange, crazy, wild, fun weekend in the Big 12. What do you make of what the Big 12 conference is after what you watched this weekend?
Absolutely unpredictable and crazy, with the exception probably of the top of it. I mean, what a game between Texas and Oklahoma. I mean, the first quarter was insane. I mean, it opened up with turnovers, a block punt for a touchdown, every kind of crazy low percentage impact play that could happen happened in the first quarter of that game, and then they kind of settled in. And what a finish for Oklahoma. I mean, most people picked Texas to win that game, and then, Iowa State, people didn't expect them to be able to beat TCU. Coming into the weekend, Oklahoma State, they thought Kansas State, a lot of people did, I thought Kansas State would smoke them, and all of a sudden Oklahoma State comes out and beats Kansas State, the defending Big 12 champs. So there was all kinds of weird stuff going on in the conference.
It is weird that TCU has lost 2 in a row, West Virginia and Iowa State now. Also weird, ESPN's FPI still only gives BYU a 28% chance to win this game Saturday afternoon in Fort Worth. What do you make of the Cougars' chances at TCU Saturday, given what we've seen the last couple of weeks from the Horned Frogs?
Well, BYU, they may be facing a team without their starting quarterback. Chandler Morris he had to leave, I think, in the third quarter last week against West Virginia. And the backup came in, and he's a talented kid, but he struggled early. And so, he fumbled the ball, and then he threw an interception. And so he's kind of got to get kind of into a rhythm there to get all of his talent onto the field. And I haven't heard anything specific about whether or not Morris will be available for this game. But if he is, he might be dinged up. He was holding his knee when he was sitting on the ground when he was hurt last week. So, I wish him well. I hope he's there so BYU has a chance to face them at their most healthy. But at the same time, that, from a standpoint of catching a break, would be a big one if Morris can't go.
Trevor, I said last week that if BYU beats TCU in Fort Worth this Saturday, I feel like I'm ready to go there emotionally, that the Cougars are a top 5 team in the Big 12. Are they already in the top 5 given all the parity, or do you feel like me, like the Cougars have to win at TCU to deserve a top 5 billing there in conference?
No, I think winning at TCU will give them more credibility toward that direction, because regardless of who plays quarterback, TCU is a lot better than people give them credit for. TCU lost a lot of guys off of last year's team that went to the national championship game against Georgia, but they restocked in the transfer portal really well. And again, Morris, especially if he plays, Morris won the starting job last year, then he got hurt. And Max Duggan took over at quarterback for TCU last year, ended up going to New York as one of the Heisman finalists. So Morris didn't get to have the season that he wanted personally, although certainly from a team standpoint they did. But TCU is still a tough out. So it would be a great win if BYU can pull it off. Is BYU in the top 4? Well, in order to go there, the running game needs to be a lot better, or the passing game needs to be massively better, one of the two. Because BYU right now in the Big 12 ranks last in total offense yards per game, and it's because they rank last in rushing yards per game. And it's hard to be one-dimensional when you're facing better teams in this conference.
Certainly, turnovers were a big story for Iowa State. West Virginia blocks a couple of kicks, one that would have tied, one that also would have won the game for TCU. What role will those intangibles and takeaways play in this Saturday's game in your mind?
I think there'll be something. It's been kind of a feature of Big 12 games, and it's been kind of a feature for BYU games as well. Whether it's special teams or defense scoring or offense doing something kind of crazy that puts them kind of behind the curve a little bit. TCU's been doing that. BYU's been doing that. The question, I think, is partially what big plays will happen that are kind of off schedule, that aren't expected. But even more than that, it's which team can either capitalize on it or on the other side can not freak out about it. because BYU as kind of an older team, more mature team, they recruit to the honor code. So there are certain advantages BYU has right there from a standpoint of accepting coaching and being disciplined. And when bad things happen so far this year, BYU has mostly responded to it very well. It's one of the reasons they're 4-1. BYU's 4-1. I mean, we're sitting here talking about the flaws on the team, and that's important because of where they want to go. You've got to get some of those things fixed. But at the same time, they're 4-1. And a big reason is that when things have gone poorly, BYU has not freaked out about it. And that's something that'll be just a great feature of this team going forward in this conference as they continue to build up their depth on the roster.
ESPN's Trevor Matich is on BYU Sports Nation. It's another Matich Monday as the Cougars prepare for a trip to Dallas-Fort Worth specifically for that showdown with TCU. Trevor, you mentioned we've talked a lot about the flaws that BYU has, and frankly, I mean, it is what it is. It's a reality. But off the bye week, what do you feel like is the most fixable flaw for BYU to help the Cougars push towards something that they hope is special the remainder of the season?
You know, I think the running game can improve a lot. Then there's two ways for it to happen. One is for the offensive line to kind of bear down a little bit more. I know they've been kind of angry individually and as a unit about some of the criticism that they've been receiving, and that's good. They need to get that anger into practice because it's practice that'll carry over to the game. But I like that. And playing angry is one of the things that will help them take the next step in terms of the running game. Another thing is Aaron Roderick, the offensive coordinator and the offensive brain trust for BYU, can help the offensive line by scheming certain ways. In other words, by helping them out with lead blocks. You know, the Tennessee Titans did this last week or 2 weeks ago, actually, when they played the Cincinnati Bengals. Their offensive line had a lot of injuries and they were really struggling. And so instead of asking the offensive line, this is the Titans now, to push forward to block multiple defenders who have leverage on the play side, they just weren't good enough to do that. What they did was had a fullback in the backfield. The fullback went out and blocked the end guy, so the offensive line didn't have to push forward. They can block the guys right in front of them and get double teams. There's things like that can happen, and I think with a bye week, they may have schemed to kind of help that a little bit.
Speaking of scheming, in the NFL, we've seen the tush-push, the brotherly shove from the Eagles. Do you think that rule will be changed in the NFL at all? And what should BYU do on 3rd and 4th down when it comes to this? Can BYU do a tush-push?
Well, if it's legal, then they may want to try it. I don't like it. I don't think it should be legal because you've got this massive humanity pushing on that poor quarterback from both sides. And so far, I haven't seen anybody get hurt, but that may be a minor miracle that nobody's gotten hurt, because if he gets into an awkward position and now everybody's pushing and he can't adjust, it could be kind of bad. And so I don't, that's more rugby than football. If you want to have a quarterback sneak, have the quarterback sneak, you know, but I don't think that people should, especially multiple people, come up from behind the quarterback and push that pile just because I think it's a risk. If BYU wants to do that, great. It's legal. Nobody's gotten hurt yet. That's just a personal opinion from my standpoint.
Well, no pile pushing necessary for that wild game you referenced off the top of our conversation today between Texas and Oklahoma. Beautiful drive by Dylan Gabriel at the end to put Oklahoma ahead. And Texas still had a shot at the end zone with a Hail Mary that was knocked down and fell short. That said, Trevor, they're clearly the two best teams in the Big 12. Is there anybody else in the conference, maybe Kansas, maybe West Virginia, that could sneak in there to a Big 12 championship game, or are we headed for a rematch between the Longhorns and the Sooners?
Kansas has already lost to Texas, and Texas has already lost one. So right now, if those are the two that are competing for the second spot in the Big 12 championship game, Texas would have to lose another conference game. Right now, you know, you look at the teams that have 0 or 1 loss, there's a whole bunch of them in conference play. It's, you know, it goes down about 7 teams, and Kansas State is still alive from that standpoint. I don't think Oklahoma State is going to make it there. I think it's a complete free-for-all as to who's going to be number 3. Then the question is, since Oklahoma's in the driver's seat at 3-0 in conference, what will happen with Texas? Because Texas with 1 conference loss, if they sweep the rest of the conference, and they're certainly good enough to do it, they certainly should do it, then everybody else is just jockeying for a bowl position, essentially. But if Texas loses another one, then all of a sudden you've got all kinds of possibilities of teams that could pop up in there, and it could be anybody. I mean, Kansas, having lost to Texas, can still get there if they went out and Texas loses another game. Kansas is a tough out. Their defense plays hard. Their offense is very difficult to defend. BYU fans saw it, the way that they're able to do so many different option plays that combine passes and runs, and they can throw the ball down the field if they need to. It's a really unique offense, and that makes them tough. Iowa State at 2-1, they've got a stout defense. And if you've got a stout defense and don't make mistakes on offense, then there's stuff you can do. Texas Tech right now is 2-1 in conference. And remember that they came within one score, I think it was 38-30 against Oregon.
Yeah.
And Oregon's one of the best teams in the country. They're a legitimate top 4 team right now. Oregon is. And so Texas Tech went toe-to-toe with those guys. So you can't count them out. I mean, this conference is going to be wide open for that number 3 spot. And if Texas falters or if Oklahoma falters, then all of a sudden you're going to have a free-for-all. And that's going to be a lot of fun to watch.
Okay, let's talk about the NFL. Fred Warner was unbelievable last night on Sunday Night Football against the Cowboys. He had a sack and an interception and a forced fumble, 8 tackles. Is he the best defensive player from BYU in the NFL ever?
He might be. Now I'm trying to scroll through guys. There have been some very good players, but Fred is such an impact player. I mean, it starts with the fact that his football intelligence is off the charts. He recognizes what's happening in front of him. He anticipates based on his study, and he gets that jump so that he can beat blockers to the mesh point and get into the backfield or get to the ball carrier or get to the pass route a step earlier than most people might. You combine that anticipation and that football intelligence with the physical ability, because he's very, very fluid. And when he gets there with bad intentions. And I love that. And so you put all those things together, this guy is as complete a football player as you'll find on the defensive side of the ball, really anywhere in the NFL. So, from a standpoint of coming out of BYU, is he the best? If there's a better one, I'd like to know who it is. And I'll tell you, it is so much fun to watch him play and represent BYU. At least in my mind, he's representing BYU. I like to believe that.
Absolutely. I've spoken to him rather recently. He's true blue through and through for sure. Trevor, great to talk with you. We appreciate the insights on another loaded edition of Matich Monday. Can't wait to talk again soon.
Thanks, guys.
Trevor Matich of ESPN on BYU Sports Nation. He's right. The race for third place in the Big 12 is wide open.
Yeah, Texas securely in second place still. It's just who's going to be third. Someone has to knock them off, I guess. Okay, BYU football with Klein Stake is back, and it's tomorrow night at 8:30 Eastern Time. Going to recap the Cincinnati game and look ahead to TCU, 8:30 Eastern on the BYUtv app Tuesday night.
Listen, I don't want to talk about conference expansion, but it's back again. Gonzaga to the Big 12, rumors swirling. Do we actually think that's going to happen? This is BYU Sports Nation.
Thought we left there late.
BYU Sports Nation is presented by the BYU Store, official outfitter of BYU fans everywhere.
Meeting Max on Mutual was unexpected.
Hi, my name is Addie.
My name's Max. I'm going to school for nursing right now.
I studied early childhood special education, and I'm a teacher now.
Addie was up in Idaho, and I was living in Draper at the time.
My friends and I just came down to Utah for a weekend. We're just all swiping on Mutual. Straight up, if it was not for Mutual, we would have not have met.
We wouldn't have been able to gone on a date had we not both been on Mutual that day at that time.
If you're looking to build your brand awareness and increase market share as BYU moves into the Big 12, this is the place, BYU Athletics. We can provide the tools you need to make sure your company is seen and heard. BYU Athletics is where you can align your products and services with loyal fans that cheer for our Cougars. And they can also help your business win. Learn more about what a partnership with BYU Athletics and your company will look like. After all, this is the place. Email sponsorship at byu.edu today.
Welcome to a partnership where customer experience comes first. It's our focus. It's your expectation. We provide support to those that go the extra mile for all of us. Supplying products, training, and service for generations. Learn more at bradyindustries.com.
Follow BYU Sports Nation on social media. Hey, we're on Facebook, X, Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok.
Welcome back to the show. I am Spencer. He is Jerem.
So,
got a lot to talk about.
Yeah.
Beginning with today's headlines.
After a bye week, BYU football headed to TCU Saturday afternoon. Pre-game on BYUtv, BYU Radio, 1:30 Eastern Time. The Monday press conference live at 2 Eastern today on the BYU football social media. Moments ago, BYU versus Texas Tech on October 21st. Homecoming!
Come on, night game!
7 Eastern on FS1. So it's barely not that 6 p.m. threshold of 26-3 since 2019, 6 p.m. or later, 14-13 before. But I do like that personally, like a 5 Mountain kick time.
Listen, BYU will start to play really well in the second quarter.
That's when they'll kick it in.
Cougars in the NFL, Part 1, beginning with Zach Wilson, who helped lead the New York Jets to a 31-21 win in Denver over the other Wilson, Russell Wilson, and the Broncos. Zach, 19 for 26, 199 yards, late interception, 26 rushing yards. Puka Nacua, playing well, stood for the Rams, 7 catches, 71 yards,
Wait, that's
and
it?
a touchdown in a 23-14 loss to the Eagles. Cooper Kupp is back, still caught 7 passes. Fred Warner helped lead the 49ers to an absolute thrashing of the Cowboys, 42-10. He did a little bit of everything. Sack, forced fumble, interception, team-high 8 tackles. He's unbelievable.
Tyler Algier, 17 carries for 40 yards for the Falcons, 21-19 walk-off win against the Texans. Taysom Hill, 3 rushes for 19 in a Saints 35-0 win against the Patriots. Crazy. Kyle Van Noy had a tackle for the Ravens in a loss to the Steelers. Baltimore blew it late. Blake Freeland got his first career start for the Colts at right tackle. 23-16 win over the Titans. Zane Anderson ruled out tonight for the Packers against the Raiders with a hamstring.
Number 10, BYU women's volleyball sweeping Oklahoma on the road on Saturday in Norman. The Cougars hit a season-high 400 for the match, led by Aaron Livingston's 22 kills. BYU now 14-3 on the season. They're 3-2 in Big 12 play. Up next, the match with Texas Tech at home.
Dude, Aaron hit over 700. She was unbelievable. Number 7, BYU women's soccer hosts Kansas State tonight, 7 Eastern on Big 12 now on ESPN+. Cougs look to get their first Big 12 home win after 3 straight draws at Southfield. Tied for 4th in the league with 12 points. Need 3 points tonight with a dub.
In the worst way. Connor Mance and Clayton Young hit the Olympic standard yesterday at the Chicago Marathon. Outstanding. Mance finished 6th with a time of 2 hours, 7 minutes, and 47 seconds. Young just behind him. 7th, time of 2 hours and 8 minutes. When we say hitting the Olympic standard, both have qualified for the Olympic trials, which will take place between June 21st and the 30th in Oregon next year.
Very cool. Jimmer Fredette helped Team Miami, who didn't have to kneel it this time, to a 2nd place finish at the 3-on-3 World Tour in Amsterdam. Good song by Guster over the weekend as he hopes to make the Paris Olympics representing the United States next year.
And finally, BYU men's golf teeing off today at the Big 12 match play event in Houston, Texas. The event goes through Wednesday, features all teams in the Big 12. The Cougars going head-to-head with Kansas State in the first round of match play. And congratulations to former BYU men's golf standout Patrick Fishburne, who has been working so hard on the Korn Ferry Tour for a number of years and has earned his PGA Tour card.
Very nice. That deserves some clapping.
The Ginger Quake.
Ginger Quake.
The red-headed, awesome, all-star, all-American.
Where are you going?
That can hit the ball just a country mile off the tee. That's where the quake comes from. I mean, it's like an earthquake when he hits the ball off the tee. Amazing. He's on the PGA Tour.
Yeah, baby.
Those are today's headlines. Now we whip. The Cougar Whip represented by Maersk, your e-commerce logistics shipping partner.
CBS Sports college basketball analyst Seth Davis reports the Big 12 has, quote, resumed high-level conference realignment talks with Gonzaga, end quote. Do you believe the Zags will actually be in the Big 12 at some point?
No, I don't.
I don't either. Next.
I just don't. I don't see how that works logistically. I don't believe it. If it happens, great, but I don't believe it.